It was chaos. I literally had to dip into every bit of liquid net worth I could access, beg, borrow, and steal capital to fund the business.
Farming in the desert sounds impossible, but Sky Kurtz is making it a reality.
I think we had, it was 34 investors in the seed round. You can imagine the horror show that was.
He's the founder and CEO of Pure Harvest Smart Farms, one of the region's most talked about agri-tech companies, using cutting-edge technology to solve MENA's food security problem and doing it at scale.
Try to be the greatest in the region. We want to be world-class. I saw a problem and I believed a big solution could exist from being born from it.
In this episode, we talk about the business of food, the realities of building something that has never been done before.
You feel, oh God, like what have I done? Do I know how to solve this? How quickly can I?
And why betting on big problems can lead to big returns. Let's get into it. Sky, you have grown up in the US, but you're now building farms in the MENA region. Tell me, why did you decide to take that leap? And why choose the MENA region to do it?
Let me start with the why do this. I saw a problem and I believed a big solution could exist from being born from it. So it was by accident, right? I quite literally didn't think I'm moving to the Middle East to start an ag tech or tech-enabled agribusiness. But I was living here and I lived the problem. I saw that there were either, low quality, seasonal, imported or available fresh produce, or there were air freighted imports that were really high quality, but extremely costly. And I was rationalizing my own consumption. I thought strawberries were a status symbol, pretty unaffordable and just crazy. Whereas I used to, when I lived in California, which is kind of the fruit and veg basket of America, maybe the food basket of America, I would buy these things daily, think nothing about them. The price was consistent, quality was always good. And then when you didn't have that available, it affected your quality of life. So I started obsessing over why is this? And that's what led me down the journey that became, Pure Harvest. I also met my co-founder, Robert Kupstas. He had been doing work with the International Renewable Energy Agency, IRENA, on water-saving solutions for the Middle East. And if you wanted to save water, you had to save food, because over 2/3 of our fresh water is used in food production, and mainly agribusiness, but using less than 1% of GDP is created from it, and less than 15% of our food supply. So it's a criminal use of a critical natural resource. So when he and I met, me on kind of the problem and the venture builder and the background in capital and capital markets, him with the authentic understanding of the problem and the technologies that could solve it, that became the Pure Harvest journey. And then why the Middle East? We did indeed think about, should we do this elsewhere, et cetera. But here we saw, and our idea was that one, by 2100, it's estimated that 80% of the world's population will be within a 12 to 13-hour flight of Abu Dhabi. And why is that? Because populations are growing in South Asia, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, et cetera, but also in the Middle East and Africa. Everywhere else in the world are flat to declining, plateauing populations. So we're in the business of bellies, in agribusiness, right? And ideally bellies, the more they're growing and eating, the per capita consumption is rising. As people age, their caloric consumption plateaus and the demand starts to shrink. So there's a tectonic shift happening in the food industry and where the humans are and where the bellies are to feed. And so ultimately we saw that if you played it forward, two powerful trends. One, demographics, which describe demand from all industries, but especially for us. But secondly, climate change. We are in what is sort of the end game of climate change. Let's be honest. It's the heat and humidity and drought that we experience here is shocking. People think this is a desert climate. It's actually not. It's an arid subtropical climate. So we get the extremes of tropical humidity and heat, but we also get arid, no water, right? Very little rainfall. The combination of that is unfortunately where the world is headed with climate change. So we thought, if you could divine a solution here and prove it in one of the harshest environments in the world, sort of the end game of climate change, and you could do so economically, that you could then bring that solution to the rest of the world, but you couldn't go the other way around. So we thought, and I believe, the solutions to some of the greatest problems in the world will be born at the coalface of those problems, right? And that's why I think things like desalination technologies, things for energy efficiency, for climate, for cooling systems will be born here, not in San Francisco, not in Shanghai. And I think that that's an opportunity for the country, but also we wanted to be part of that.
And I think what's really interesting about your journey as well is that it's very unconventional. You have moved from being an investor into being a founder. What was behind that decision? Why couldn't you just hire a proven entrepreneur with a great track record to execute that for you?
When I was in private equity and I was 31, 32, or turning 32, I had planned from a very young age. I grew up very poor. My family was socioeconomically challenged, and I had one goal in my life, and it was to not be poor. I literally didn't have a specific definition of it, but also just knew I hated the powerlessness. I hated the struggle, and I just wanted out. So interestingly, I didn't realize, but I had orchestrated every element of my life toward one goal. In my academic achievement, in my career, I worked on Wall Street right out of undergrad. One, that's very unusual to come from Arizona State University to Wall Street. But secondly, I didn't even know what Wall Street was. I mean, I'm pretty sure I'd never been in a building over 6 stories when I had first gone to New York and Manhattan. But I was like, yes, I hear there's money in Wall Street, and that's where I want to be. And so I found a way to get there. And then, of course, being there, I worked at Lehman Brothers in New York. It opened my eyes. And I started, I loved the challenge and I loved the environment, but I'm not sure I was all that passionate about how intangible my job was. I felt, especially when I was in transactions, it was quite intangible. Then I moved to private equity and it felt more tangible. I was backing companies, part of management teams. But interestingly, I found constantly that I was drawn to the management. I spent less time kind of reading industry reports and evaluating the next trend to place capital, and far more time on my portfolio companies, too much time, trying to be part of their team, right? Trying to feel part of the team. And I found that was something I was really lacking. So I realized if I don't hang a shingle now, I never will, right? The more senior you become, you'll eventually have golden handcuffs. You'll have family commitments. You live a certain lifestyle with that wealth. And what I had realized when I was standing there is that I made it to this goal. I was a vice president at the firm, earning good money. And I wasn't happy. I had reached this destination I had been seeking since I was young, but I never really asked myself, what next? I didn't know what was next. And interestingly, being an entrepreneur and specifically focusing on impact businesses has given me that feeling, that purpose. I may one day go back to investing. I miss elements of it and I love it. But I think that this has been great for me in this point in my life. It's given me focus and purpose and pride.
You started with tomatoes. Can you tell me what was behind that decision?
It was actually quite surgical. A couple of things. One, tomatoes are the largest piece of the fruit and vegetable market in this region. So we needed to be able to prove to investors, not that we could win in some niche categories, some exotic Korean strawberries, which we now grow. But imagine I'd proven only those. People would be like, that's great. That's a nice little niche premium market. How are you going to do in the mass market? So we wanted to prove the largest piece of the addressable market, right? First. Secondly, tomatoes have extremely discernible quality. The color, symmetry, shape, whether, for example, on our cherry and the vine, are they all stacked on a fishbone? Very technically difficult and can be assessed both by experts and by consumers easily. People shop at their eyes first, long before their mouths. So the visible beauty and the aroma could be very visible. So we picked one that had powerful cues to discern its quality, both to consumers, but also to technical and agronomical experts, which would be assessing us in future investment. The last piece, a tomato, we planted a seedling and then 8 to 12 weeks later it harvests, but then it goes for 52 weeks. If you make a mistake in month 4, you lose the rest, right? We wanted to be able to prove year-round climate control and year-round consistency. Nothing else would do it. I can fake it on a leafy green. We plant leafy greens and every 21 to 28 days we harvest. If I make a mistake in month 4, you won't even know as long as my total is high across the year, right? We needed to be able to prove to investors that we could control the climate consistently across an entire year and have an economic cost of production and that consumers would buy across that whole year. There was no better test case than a tomato. It was the perfect one. Now, if I'm honest, that was maybe my acumen as an investor. There was no reason to even start building one little pilot greenhouse if that's all we were ever going to do. It was a subscale proof of concept to prove technological feasibility. We call it fail small and win big, and prove product market fit. So not only did I design that micro proof of concept to be just big enough to prove the market, but small enough to minimize my capital need. But I was already thinking about that next raise, which would scale us to a bigger business. And looking back from the end, what would I need to prove to what would be the critiques where some investor would pick a hole in my case? And how do I remove every one of those objections so that if I deliver the proof of concept, I have a certainty of being able to scale it up, right? And that was all very deliberate. Spent 10 months in land selection, design, engineering. Even the legal structure of how we would own land and partner had to be designed and partnered with Anil Mehta, our general counsel, who used to be the GC of Kareem. Every single piece of it had to be deliberate because it was first of its kind, asset intensive, ag tech, onshore, capital intensive. I mean, it was a big risk. And so we knew that we had to be extremely deliberate. And that's why we chose tomatoes.
That's what I love about this story, by the way. It comes, obviously, you're coming from that background. So you knew what you will be challenged on. And you're like, I'm going to tackle this. No one can say anything.
It's interesting. If I showed you the PowerPoint deck I had in 2016 when we first started discussing with investors, we closed our first round in 2017. I'm not kidding. I had like the tenets of the thesis and then the probative work that proved or disproved the tenet of that thesis. And then I had done gruesome work. So if you clicked on any one of those, you'd go into a data room where there was an entire folder perfectly archived explaining it. And investors have consistently said to us, and I think it's great credit to my team, because I know I'm difficult. I demand a lot and maybe even perfection in such preparations, but we obsess over having everything they could possibly have thought about and need. We've double clicked on and everything because we should have done the work. I used to have their job. So it's very reasonable that they should ask to me, market size. Why have you not sized the market? We need this. So we try to do all of that. It's not that we're never stumped and somebody asks something we haven't thought about. Just recently we were asked, for example, how will the Trump tariffs affect you? For example, when that was happening, we hadn't yet done a detailed economic analysis. So we said, we'll be right back, did a careful economic analysis, built models and et cetera. That we do get asked sometimes questions we haven't tackled yet, but I think it's our job to try to anticipate the risks they would face and do as much work as you can to try to address those concerns.
It's great having everything on paper, but then when you come and practice and see how there is uptake to the product, how was that though? Did it match the projections you had in those very detailed folders?
If I'm honest, it exceeded them. One of the lessons I learned, which I'd never, ever thought about, all of my years as an investment professional, you always focus on the downside. You stress test the model. You have scenario analysis, right? And it's always thinking about the downside. Literally upside risks are not equally likely. Often there is a bias toward downside risk because we inherently have optimism biases. But there are upside risks. And what we did that it led me to, I now espouse this, what I call the rule of 40. Plan your business and your capitalization to ensure that you could survive it taking 40% longer, it underperforming 40%, but also outperforming 40%. Because you can grow yourself into bankruptcy too. And that almost happened to us. We had modeled that, and I'll even say the numbers now because there's some public data out about our yields. In first year, we thought on what's called the tomato on the vine, the trust tomato. It's kind of the bellwether of the industry. And so we thought we would do 68 kilos in the first year, 75 in second, and 85 in the third. And we would plateau at 85-ish to 90 maybe one day. Well, we hit nearly 90 in the first year. And not only that, out of the gate, in the first few months, we had what's called a bumper harvest, a flush of production. It was chaos. We didn't have the money to buy packaging or to hire temporary labor to help with that harvesting, fertilizers, stock, trucks. It was chaos. I literally had to dip into every bit of liquid net worth I could access, beg, borrow, and steal capital to fund the business in the time it took me to go run a bridge race. So literally we opened the farm and I was out raising capital 3 weeks later. It was chaos. And it almost killed us. We almost went into bankruptcy. Because of outperforming our estimates. And so it was a good problem to have. But on the other hand, it woke me up to an idea that, you have to plan for the upside risk too.
That's definitely a great problem to have. But how did you feel in that moment? Were you unsure? Were you scared?
I think I felt something all entrepreneurs feel that, and it never really leaves you though, but it probably becomes more manageable, but sort of you feel imposter. You feel oh God, like what have I done? Do I know how to solve this? How quickly can I? I remember we had these best laid plans about how careful we'd be about tracking KPIs and data. And I thought I'd have all this time as the yields started to come out. And instead it was pandemonium, right? And I'm like, am I equipped to handle this? So I think that, yeah, there was fear only in that I didn't want to let everyone down. And also fear in that I told you how financially conservative I am. I had to believe in my ability to raise bridge capital because I put in hundreds of thousands of dollars, which was a lot of money to me, to bridge the company, just injected it and got friends to do the same. And sorting out, like, we'll sort out the details and the terms of that later, just get money in the company right now. And that was scary, you know. On the other hand, I think I did have confidence that though the yields that were coming out would prove, you know, better than the model we had. And if investors backed that model, they would back this better story. Where it was chaotic early on. You know, it was those first months, and also trying to find markets. We hadn't aligned, like we had focused on 2 customers at the time. It was Carrefour and Spinneys. And because we didn't think we'd have more product for more. And then we had to like find offtake. We were donating it to labor camps, and we were finding all kinds of things to do, donating it to schools because we couldn't move the product fast enough and open up channels. And there were like 3 of us, right? And then the team that was managing the farm day to day. So yeah, it was a scary time.
So you talked about how the first product was very calculated. What about what came next? You have strawberries, jams, sauces, berries. How do you decide what's next on your product line?
Very good question. I would say generally it's been calculated. We have a ritual that I credit Francisco Partners. Francisco is quite deliberate about a lot of things, and it was a magical place to work. But what I would say, one of the things that I saw in every portfolio company is a very consistent and predictable cadence. And what I mean by that is, and we follow this religiously, we have 6 board meetings a year. The quarterly meetings that everybody has. Next quarter, what's going on? How'd last quarter go for governance and reporting and accountability, blah, blah, blah. And that's all good and great, and everyone does that. But there are 2 special meetings. One of them, in the middle of the year, we host an offsite. We lock everyone in the room, the board and all of management. We prepare well in advance. And that's where we tackle true strategic planning. We start with the external market context. What has happened to interest rates? What are commodity shocks? Competition? Dynamics in the region, population shifts, ... macro, what is happening in the world around us and the chessboard. And then the second day is in the micro. What are we doing against that external market context? How are we maximizing our opportunity toward these things? How are we tackling the pain points in our business and where we're trying to be the greatest in the region? We want to be world-class. So we are watching the greatest companies in the world in our sector. What are they doing? And we say, how do we be more like the winners and less like the losers? That sounds simple, but it takes immense work and study of these companies. And we do all of that ahead of time. It's very challenging on my growth team, which are a lot of them are ex-management consultants. But we do that work, and then we go deliberate it in a room. And what we come out with is a 3-year plan. I don't believe in 5 or 10-year plans. I think, God help, if you have a 5-year crystal ball, please come and manage my money. Most people don't. So I think 3 years out there, you have a pretty good idea. You can see what's happening. So we set what we call the compass, a 3-year plan every year, like clockwork. And then the 6th meeting is for the annual plan, the business plan, the budget. But it's not a budget, it's a business plan. And it's how do I plot the first year of that 3-leg journey? So you start at the macro and then the 3-year plan, and then you go and have a deliberate, session and set of work on that first year plan. So I share that because, one, it's useful for other people. I encourage you to follow the similar cadence. But also it leads to how do we get to what we do next? We're extremely deliberate about it. We're looking at what is the size of the market? Do consumers differentiate and recognize quality and value in this area? What do our retailers want? And we get feedback from our customers. Where do we believe that we can produce economically and above our costs of capital? And we run extensive economic analysis. So it is quite deliberate how we prioritize. For example, berries. Strawberries, we knew would be challenging. They're extremely difficult to grow. But we also knew flesh fruits and fruits, highly differentiable quality, high value. They don't ship well. They don't store well. So producing those locally or regionally has a structural competitive advantage. And we've been right? And if we can build a great capability in growing berries, the market potential is huge. The margins will be stable and structurally protected, et cetera, right? Another example, years ago, I could show you a slide from like 2018 where I had a tomato in the middle of the slide and I had arrows of vectors, future vectors of growth. And one of those was value-added products. what we were looking at is how do we take the off-spec, ugly produce and turn it into something higher value rather than dumping it at a third or a fifth of the value of retail produce, because it's so high quality. But for example, on our cherry on the vine, if one falls off, you can't sell it as loose. It's very low value. So how do we turn that into something valuable? And that's where we thought about what we're doing now, these sauces and jams we launch. But that was ideated years ago. It's just we finally got to a scale of having enough of it to meaningfully serve the market, to have the people that could launch, because that's a wholly different product line. You're now launching an FMCG category. The capabilities in our team, Olivier, who leads our commercial, and Antoine. Antoine used to work for Bon Moment, the jam company. And so we have people in our company that have the muscles to do this, right? That's why. So we're deliberate about both the opportunity, but do we have the people, the time, the resource to execute this well? And we try not to do anything that we won't do well.
Tell me about the first time you made real money. How did that really feel? And how were you able to make that money?
Relative to the scale of my net worth at the time, when I was in college, I was recruited to buy or to sell cars. And one, it's an awful job, but it's also fantastic training. And I worked for what's called the Van Tuyl Auto Group. It's one of the largest automotive groups in the world. And they send you to a 3-week course. And it's called the Van Tuyl School of Automotive Sales Professionals, ASB. You win this certification. Fantastic training on negotiation, identifying the objections, et cetera. And I remember, to this day, I remember the lessons of that. It was maybe more valuable than elements of my business degree. Now, why I mention this, when I went and sold cars, you were literally living off commissions. But what I found is if my effort and my talents could get me a transaction, I could make more in an hour than I made in a month, because I used to work at the International House of Pancakes. I was serving pancakes to make money to pay for college and school. And I found in a few hours of that, I can make more than I made a month or two in the other. That was when it hit me. And I remember I sold 3 cars. They call it a hat trick. I sold 3 cars in one day. And I can't remember it, but it was easily $3,500 of commissions. And I was 19 years old. And that was a lot of money to me. And I remember I took myself to Denny's, believe it or not, and I bought myself a steak, which was probably like $14. But I felt I was splurging. I was like, I deserve this. I remember thinking, you're the man, as I'm eating this cheap, flimsy steak. But I remember that being a moment of pride. I can remember sitting in that window.
Sky, I feel like this is a personal attack. This is what I would do today. Well, hopefully better than Denny's. With all respect to that brand. But that said, yeah, that was the first time for me that was real money. What do you say to young entrepreneurs? Should everyone be starting a business that requires a lot of money upfront? No,
I think founder market fit is an interesting one that people talk about more these days. But if, for example, your business you're a first-time founder and your business requires we had to raise nearly $6 million for that first build. At the time, that was the largest ever seed financing in the Middle East, right? You had to have a specific CV, acumen to be able to command that kind of capital. And even then it was a risk. I almost didn't get it done, right? We had to beg, borrow, and steal. I think we had, it was 34 investors in the seed round. You can imagine the horror show that was. So a lot of no's and a lot of pain to get that done. But most founders maybe wouldn't have the network, the experience, even their own capital. I was living off my own savings, and I was able to do that having saved from my prior career in life. So founder market and founder problem fit are quite important. It's not to dissuade people from swinging big if they have a big idea, but this maybe gets to how do you get that done? It's not alone, it's with a team. If you don't have that credibility and that track record, bring people in who do. I'm a huge believer, do not sole found a business. Not to say that some people haven't done it and been successful, but it is a lonely journey. It is challenging. It's also the risk that you and your investors are taking, because if you have a mental health challenge of death in your family, you have an injury, you make a terrible decision and no one's there to counter you and combat you on it. I think that's dangerous. I'm a huge believer of limiting investment in sole-founded companies, unless it's an experienced, seasoned entrepreneur who's done it multiple times. I think why do I say this though? To that founder who wants to do capital-intensive business and maybe has a great idea but doesn't have the background, bring them in. It can either be a co-founder or it can be an advisor who puts some stake in, says, I believe in this to the point I'd put a bit of money in, and has some stock for providing you counsel, advice, and lending you their Rolodex and reputation. These are other ways to acquire that. And you might give a few percent of your company away and be very precious about that. It's a tiny piece of a much bigger pie if you actually get to build your dream, and this person's skill and experience and reputation can help you achieve that.
Because the startup scene has been like growing a lot in the Middle East, anyone who wants to start a business, they're like, yes, I'm going to go for the high growth startup model. I'm going to hit IPO. I'm going to do all of this. But then you look back and you're like, this can be a traditional business that can bring you consistent, good money. Not every business model requires also investment.
I agree. Too many people think that winning is raising money and running. But like, if you don't, once you're on that treadmill, you can't get off. If you take high cost, high growth equity capital, you have got to deliver to the end. Because otherwise you disappoint these investors. Often their terms can have consequences for you. And that's when people start to think of capital as somehow aggressive or bad. No, they gave you their money and they are holding you accountable to objectives that you promised them when you took the money. And so don't take that money if you're not ready to be on that journey for the long haul. And also, it may not be needed. If you can have a profitable service business or a profitable software company and scale the business organically, that it can be even more rewarding, often financially, because you dilute as well when you sell capital, even more rewarding journey, but also one where you have real wealth. Because being rich is having money. Being wealthy is having money and having time. What keeps me up at night is a world where we could build a $500 billion company and have the people who backed it when it was a crazy idea make nothing, or management make nothing, the people who gave their lives to it, right? That's the kind of stuff that keeps you up at night. And also, if I'm honest, keeps me motivated when it's gotten hard and I've thought, I should hire somebody else to run this and I should go be on the board and do something else, right? But then I reflect on, I love it. I really do. And I'm like, recently when we won awards and we had our new products on the shelf, I'm just like, this is why I do this. It was wonderful. But then I look at the people that gave their lives to me in this company. I look at how hard my team works and how they believe in it and they count on me. And I think those are the times when you sit here thinking the hours to EBITDA don't make sense. What am I doing? I try to say, all right, if not for yourself, do it for these people. So ask me if it was worth it when we see where we land. We're trying to get the company to a scale that it could list in, call it 27, 28, at least be ready by 27, but list in 28 or 29 based on the market timing, prospects, pipeline, you name it. That's where we're trying to head, and I'm trying to hold that line. So ask us when we get there. We thought that journey would be a great story. We have some of those. There's the Spinnies is a domestic company that's raised and gone public, but there are not a million of them. And we want to be one of the people that try to set that path. A mission-driven, homegrown brand that exports its brand, its products, its technology. We do not copy paste here. We build and sell to other people. Singapore is working with us on exporting our technology to Singapore, not the other way around. How many companies have done that at this region? Not a lot, not none, but not a lot. So that's where we want to head. When we get to that milestone, I think then I'll be able to say, yes, it was worth it. If I somehow crash and burn along the way or something goes terribly wrong, probably will feel difficult. I mean, of course, the learning and the journey will have been great, but the sacrifices will be difficult to stomach.
Great. Going into kind of knowing you more, Sky, you came into the Middle East just 7-8 years ago now. As an outsider, how has that helped you and how has that challenged you?
First time I've heard this question. Good one. How has it helped me? I think it's helped me in that I have a truly global perspective. For example, when I said I never have seen Iran or Jordan tomato product as my competition, I'm measuring my product on objective standards of BRICS, which is sugar content of the product, symmetry, burst, all these attributes of quality and flavor and shelf life on international scale. I remember initially I was looking at European standards, knowing they're often higher than American standards. We're famously a little flexible in the food industry, right? And so I started looking at how do I make a European quality tomato. I never even thought about the idea of making a, local seasonal product, right? So that international perspective on standards was there day one. And that includes also on capital and how we manage. I thought Francisco Partners is one of the highest performing private equity firms in the world ever. Why would I drop my standards because I left that firm? I want to try to impose everything I learned and what I saw. You can't unsee what success and what professionalism looks like. So I've tried to inject that here. And I think that's been beneficial for the company. I would even say a lot of my employees have said they've learned a lot from me from that, because I bring this outside perspective, injecting it. How has it disadvantaged me? I think in some ways I haven't appreciated, and maybe this is ignorance, I haven't appreciated the cultural boundaries. I think that I often didn't have the patience for the relationship and the energy, like time, as you heard, is scarce. And I'm like, yeah, let's get to the deal. Let's sort this out. And that I'm not making an investment in the trust, or admittedly in respecting and honoring their culture. And that's hurt me, particularly in Saudi. That's hurt me. I think UAE is a little more, they're used to Western American guys. Whereas I think in parts of Saudi, that's been harmful. I think that another area that it's been hard, not appreciating the complexity of certain things. So for example, I thought the moment we proved out Pure Harvest, the tech, the product, the mission-driven brand, the next day we'd have billions of capital from, major sovereign institutions. I genuinely thought, who wouldn't want to back this? It's food security, water conservation, economic diversification, sustainability with one hammer. This is undeniable global powerful appeal, but it's a little more complex than that. We've seen the challenges. There are local farming companies that, like if Mubadala backs a company, it gets perceived. Admittedly, we're not really competing with the local farms. That's mainly imports from places like Iran and Jordan, et cetera. But whereas but we're perceived that way. Another example is, of course, there are other agribusinesses that have interests from various ADQ or Salal or Salik or others, right? There's complexity there. And I don't think, again, I appreciated that, this hydra of ownership that is this, these markets are smaller and more intimate, and there's mutual stakeholders. And that complexity, I think, maybe just the brash Americanness of best product wins, let's go to the market, right? And I think maybe that's harmed me, made me ignorant to the complexity and cycle that planning would take. So those are areas that I think have affected us.
I'm from the region and I operate in Saudi, and the whole relationship thing is like even more so in Saudi than anywhere else. We're not ready to do business unless we can trust you as a person. That's the sentiment in the region. Yeah.
Very true. And I think I never gave it the patience. I'm just not trying to be a jerk, just time. But then realizing by not making that investment early on, it affects you later. You actually aren't winning anything. You're extending the length of the deal because the time it takes them to get trust, and the time, or they don't ever really trust you. And then the deal reflects that. It reflects a lack of trust. And I think that's a learning,
Since we're looking into you as a person, Sky, what's your biggest weakness or blind spot that you had to work on?
There's so many. Maybe insecurity. I think that my wife would say that. She's surprised how insecure I am, and I am too. I think it's hard to overcome certain things, but I think that is, in a way, when I don't trust my own conviction, it's always hurt us. I would actually say some of my closest colleagues from Pure Harvest have said that. Didn't you say that in the beginning? And I'm like, yes, I did. Why didn't I just listen to myself? But I have this inherent belief that I've got to prove myself to everybody. And I see in great leaders, they have this surety, even if they're faking it, because it's commonly known that it's better to make an 80 or 90% right decision than to make no decision at all. Like in the fog of war, running any direction is better than standing still and being shot at. And I find that I inherently have this bias to needing to prove myself and needing to justify. And I don't know where it probably is deep-seated from my life, my childhood, this constant chip on my shoulder to prove myself, be the first from Arizona State to Wall Street and prove myself in every area. But at some point, I've got to escape that insecurity. And yeah, I think it'll make me a speedier decision maker. It'll make me more confident, and that confidence inspires other people. And I think it'll probably speed things up, because often we get to somewhere where I'm like, didn't I say that in the beginning? Why didn't I just listen to myself? Could have saved us a lot of work.
It's something I struggle with, and it's something I've been struggling with lately. I left my business last year, and that took a toll on me trusting myself. And I'm like, I should have just trusted myself, but sometimes we don't. We listen to probably other people's opinion around us. They know better, but you know yourself better.
You know what? I'd even say we project what their opinion might be. We actually have a view of how they might view us because of how we're feeling. But often if you go ask somebody how they actually feel about you or about what happened, they have a completely different view. So I think that especially when somebody's shame is a powerful emotion. And I think it's one that motivates this region too much. One of the things that I've seen is often people are more afraid of failure than the rewards of success in winning. And I've sat around a group of investors where there's almost a picking on the person who had lost money in a deal is 2/3 of the conversation, 1/3 is anyone's successes. And I think that's interesting. In America, we would celebrate the failure and the successes, but mainly talk about the successes, fluff each other up. You're amazing. No, you're amazing. And there's this different culture, whereas I think there's this, that creates this fear of shame. Like I lose if I lose, and if I win, I can't talk about it, right? And I think that's interesting. So I would say why shame is particularly powerful is when we fail at something, that shame makes us project that everybody sees my failure. Everyone sees what I am. They see my mistakes. And then it holds us back and it makes us hold our heads low. Whereas I think that if you actually ask somebody, hey, my startup didn't work out, they'd be like, we're so proud of what you did. You gave it your honest go. I find that also when founders have that when their company's failing and they have an honest dialogue with their shareholders, guys, we tried this, we made these mistakes, here's what's going on. You'll often find the shareholders want to jump in and try and save it and help you. How can we help? Whereas when they hide their failures, hide the problems, show up one day, say we're out of money and it's going to be over, everyone feels they stole from you, right? And so I think it's that fear of shame and all and projection is actually holding people back.
And there's power in just talking about it and being honest. Exactly what you said. But in terms of us being honest here, what was your biggest regret in business?
I had a period in my life where I was struggling with substance abuse, and I was self-medicating, and unhappy, burned out, etc. And I think that was the biggest challenge, because I think I didn't know, maybe I didn't want to acknowledge that I was doing that, and I didn't know really. And some people tried to help me and tried to intervene, and I tried to hide it. And I tried to, instead of confronting it, when I finally confronted it, one, I actually helped myself heal and be better. And I've been better for many years. I became more productive. I didn't realize how many days I was losing in hangovers. And hangovers are awful, just awful. And it was self-inflicted misery. And so I was doing that on like these weekend warrior events. And then I would just feel terrible for days. And I realized in hindsight, it was hitting an escape. It was the only time I felt unworried about my stresses, my worries, my concerns. And it was not healthy for me, right? It was hurting my health. It was hurting people I loved. And it was definitely affecting my performance. I luckily managed to get through and carry things forward. But I think that was a decision I regret, where a personal behavioral challenge was affecting my life and I was containing it. And it definitely affected, the speed with which I was able to get things done. I say now, I'm always me. And, I call it living in the gray. You don't have the high highs, you don't have the low lows. You're always okay. But even on my weekends, I'm up at 6 or 7:30 in the morning. I am always able to be on a moment's notice, prepared. I'm productive, and maybe too much so. I should rest more. But I didn't have that when I was struggling, right? When I didn't realize the time I was losing on that. And maybe to others who maybe probably drink or do whatever you do more than you know, or more than you'd like to admit, if you can eliminate that piece of your life, not saying if you drink, but modestly, but hopefully don't, it's healthier. But if you can eliminate that piece of your life, the time you gain is shocking. I mean, even just one day every week or every 2 weeks, imagine how hard it would be to find 8 hours back in your schedule. We all struggle to find an hour or two, 8 of them, and do that every week. Compound that across a year, the things you could accomplish in your life, in your fitness goals, in your personal goals, et cetera. So one, it's probably the demon that I faced and I struggled with that hurt me. But then also I think my advice to others is, if you ever struggle with something similar, sort it out quickly. Get help. There's no shame in that. And once again, if you went to people and said, I'm struggling, what awful person is going to sit here and put you down? They're going to be like, how can I help?
Thank you for being honest. I'm sure that would help a lot of people. What's next for you, and what excites you about the future?
Well, we're raising capital now, and it's always risky to tell the world that, because if it doesn't work out like you want it to, but I'm long risk. We started that process late last year, and we're near the end, and I'm hopeful we'll get that done very soon. Post that, we'll be expanding. The company is geared and ready, and my team is ready. And that would be increasing our presence in Saudi. We're looking to enter the Moroccan market, serving Europe. And so there's some really exciting plans ahead. And the team has been working at a breakneck pace for a very long time. We're going to try and lean into being, we were pioneers in this sector. And we want to play to win and capture a large piece, and ideally a dominant share, of the market that we created. And competitors are coming, we're aware of it, and they should. But we want to make sure that we build, ideally an iconic brand that's really successful in the region.
On money and personal bets, what are you betting on in the next decade? If someone is listening to us, but think like $10,000, a young entrepreneur or a young person listening to us, what should they be doing with this $10,000?
I think there's a classic expression of like, stick to what you know. Where do you, whoever you are, have authentic insight? Where you, for example, I'd bet on a young entrepreneur knowing a lot more than I do about what a media company might be exciting or a powerful trend. Fashion could be a powerful trend. We were just talking about beauty in the other room. I would definitely not bet on me to identify the next beauty trend, right? So I think that try to find something that you're authentic to and that you have good insight into, and bet on that, because often your intuition, your judgment, the collective knowledge will help you pick the right idea and your investment going forward. And I think that would be the advice, because if you're just picking something that sounds interesting or whatever, if you really dig into the reasons why you're choosing that, it might be quite surface level, right? And then what's your unique insight? You're pretty much gambling. You might as well just put it on red, right? And you might have even better odds. So that would be one. The second, without a doubt, and this is AI, right? I mean, but really thinking through, much like blockchain was a buzzword, AI is now the buzzword, but really thinking about what it's enabling. Technology, all technology, isn't a product in and of itself. It's a tool. It enables products. So technology enables services. Is Airbnb a technology company? People would say yes. No. It's a website with some algorithms behind it. It's a service that helps people with properties meet people who want to rent them. Very few actual technologies exist, right? When I mean that, most of the market cap created over the last 20 years is services from technologies. Amazon, is it a tech company? Interestingly, its core business, not really. It's a marketplace and a service business. And except for its web services business is a technology. It's a virtualization platform and all. So I want to highlight that people think I'm a tech. Often tech is a tool. And I share that because when you think about AI, what is it enabling? What is it? Is it enabling some product that has attributes? Is it a software that is now enabled by AI to do things it couldn't do before in faster computation, cheaper, whatever, better? If you really think about that, you'll start to see which AI makes sense. But somebody just putting AI in the name of their company or on .ai on their website and suddenly being investable, a lot of people are going to lose a lot of money. I mean, there's a lot of really bad bets out there. So be mindful of that. But there's also going to, of course, be cataclysmic bets. I mean, even we all experience it day to day using the technologies. It is remarkable, the amount of efficiency gain and the amount that what it can be accomplished.
If you're 21 today, what advice would you give yourself?
There's a great saying from Ted Turner, of all people, who's a bit of an interesting person, but he said, the keys to success are early to bed, early to rise, work hard as hell, and advertise. And why I say that's an interesting wisdom is that I think there is still, even in an AI-powered world, there's no substitute for grit and work ethic. And it's rare these days, or it's harder to come by. We all know the story of the millennial or the Gen Zer who wants to say, I've had 2 years of experience. Of course I should be CEO. But this meme, if you will, is because there is a lot of that happening. And so I think my advice to that person would be, have that humility to make the investments in yourself, your knowledge, in your career, and building a track record, and then because you'll hear the success case of the 21-year-old who started the company and whatever, but you don't hear of the thousands that failed, the millions. It is such a rare story. And so, but everyone wants to be that one in a million, right? And we all have a bias of believing I'm special, I'm a unique starfish. But I ask you to think of where the pattern of success is. If you to build a career, build a name for yourself. And it's usually in great and consistent work ethic and focus. It's building skill, competency, and experience that complements the direction you're trying to take your life. And then, of course, character. I don't think we talk enough about character. People that honor their commitments, people that, respect other people and treat them well. We all know how gross it is when you watch someone treat a server bad or do something. It's just foul. And yet somehow we don't punish those people enough, in my view. I think if we should acknowledge, and I would ask you as yourself, and maybe I didn't ask that enough when I was young, like, do you like who you are? Like, are you proud of that person? And as you evolve, do you have a vision of the person you want to be at 25, at 30, and then keep setting that vision?
Shall we finish this off with a quick rapid fire?
Sure, let's do it.
Describe your morning routine.
I work. I usually wake at 5:30 or 6, and then I wake my daughter just in time to go to school. And usually I take her. It's one of our rituals so that I get time with her in case I don't get home till too late to see her.
Nice. Describe yourself in 3 words.
Oh, gritty, ambitious, loving.
Who inspires your leadership style?
Maybe it's my leadership philosophy. I would say Warren Buffett. I found a man who had such formidable success, had this incredible humanity about him, the way to have a dialogue while managing $300 billion and being a titan of the world, living in Omaha, Nebraska with humility, had this conversational style with his shareholder letters and all that educated the world. I think he was a different thinker, but also somebody that showed you can be wildly successful without having to become an arrogant prick.
Nice. What is the biggest mistake someone can make while starting up a business?
I think the arrogance to believe they can do it alone. I think that organizations and great ideas are built by teams and groups of people. And when you believe that it's yours and yours alone, or that it's only on your shoulders, you may even succeed, but it's almost by surprise because the risk you're taking with your own career and with people's capital is immense. So I think it's this idea that you're somehow in it alone, or even worse, that you believe that you should do it alone. I think that's a danger.
What is one trend you completely underestimated?
Wow. If I'm honest, influencers. I thought it was a fad early on. I thought it was vain, maybe not the greatest, with all respect. I thought it was not the greatest representation of our society and our values. And I thought it would pass. I am absolutely wrong. I mean, the amount of marketing spend that's moved to that, the industry that's built, and many of them who have built powerful and authentic personalities and become influential people. But early on, I thought it was a fad that was just going to pass, and I thought it was a bit silly. If anything, I was probably a bit dismissive and ignorant to the power that trend would become, and obviously the force in media it is today.
Awesome. Journey or destination? What matters more?
The journey. Yeah, the destination, actually, I find that people are often, when they get where they were going, they are disappointed. It was actually the crusade and the purpose that it gave you that moves you forward.
Thank you for that. It's been a pleasure talking to you today.
You too. Thank you for the interview. It was very interesting.